few weeks ago, I asked you to design enemies for my project, and you guys delivered. This is the Metroidvania Forge Enemy Design Showcase. We're going to go through the submissions, highlight awesome ideas, and look at what makes some really great pixel art. Now, first off, I seriously want to say thank you to all of you who participated. The variety, creativity, and overall effort that you guys put in is just awesome, and so I'm really excited to show what you've created to the rest of our community. As we go through these, I'll be pointing out both the things that worked really well, as well as some ideas that I have on how you could push your ideas to the next level. So whether or not you've submitted, I think there's going to be some good opportunities for everybody watching to learn and to improve. All right, so let's take a look at what you guys created. Okay, so from Harmless Trust here, the very first entry submitted, if I recall, this is the Demon Chest. After seeing other chests filled with delicious treasure, Demon Chest has grown very envious and hungry. Unfortunately, it is cursed and would rather have your soul. I love this, inspired by D&D Mimics, and you can see the examples that are given on this page. I like how you tried to illustrate how you expect this enemy to work. You know, if you were providing this to a developer as an example, that might really be appreciated so that they understand how to tie those animations together. And then you've got demonstrations of each state. So there's like idle, alert, the swoop, which you're saying you could spin the sprite in the animation player, I think. Chomp attack. I didn't do the swoop, by the way, but totally valid. And then there's a death/damage animation. And let's check this out in A-Sprite real quick. I didn't import the animations so that we could look at them individually because they're all here, but you can see the sprite sheet well laid out and pretty much ready to use. Let's go ahead and look at this in game. And I've plopped one of these chests in a small room, so there's no way to avoid this guy. So here we go. He's awake. I want to turn on my abilities real quick. And I just love this, how easy it was to get these following flying enemies from a couple of these. There's some issues with the animation and the timing. Apparently I need to work those out, but I just think this is a great enemy. Now, he's really well sized for the player, and I think my biggest comment is I would love to see a version of him where the idle is him sitting on the ground. Not only that, but have him in idle state look just like a regular treasure chest in the game, because I think, you know, going with that mimic concept from D&D, I think that would just be awesome and make it so that, you know, you walk up and he doesn't awake until you try and like open the chest or something like that, right? But anyways, Harmless Trust, thank you for your submission. Now, this entry from Alex Oner, this is the Corrupted Stump sprite. Now, beautiful page. I love all the examples. You kind of streamlined it by combining different animations, and you indicate that with the little number here that corresponds with them down below. This is great. One thing that I was immediately impressed by with this entry is how seamlessly the style and the artwork fit into the level, which is pulled from the sprites for the Metroidvania Forge. So if I was critiquing this as like an art director, as though you were creating stuff for my game, which is kind of one of the metrics, then I would say you nailed this one. I think this is probably the best as far as matching the style. It's clear that you put a lot of effort into that. Now, as far as enemy design, this is also extremely unique. So this is the Corrupted Stump. It has two states, pure healing stump and like a malevolent. So let's read this. In pure state, it's a healing stump, which heals the hero. To heal, you must cut the leaves by hitting the stump. Healing leaves grow back once per day. Now, we don't have a time of day or day-night cycle in this game, but that would be awesome. When corrupted, a malevolent fly agaric mushroom appears on the healing stump. Under the influence of the fly agaric, am I saying that right? The stump sprouts roots from the ground, and when damaged, it releases spores to injure its victim. To win, you must cut the fly agaric mushroom while standing behind the stump. Now, that would be pretty simple to implement. I didn't implement all of that because, you know, I didn't have time to make it all work the way it should need to work. But I think that concept is awesome. You've given a great range of animations, and he has this thing that kind of attacks the player. Now, I coded this up a little bit differently, but I want to show you in game how it works. Okay, so let's go over and find him. I've added him to the scene over here. I can hit him. I didn't make it so that see, there's one of those things popping up. I didn't make it so that he damages me because I just didn't get to that. And he's always kind of in this poisony state. I think it'd be cool to have spores fly out when I hit him. But you can see he is kind of randomly attacking with these these little vines, and they don't, I made them so they spawn in a random area around the player, so they may or may not spawn right underneath him. The goal is that as you're walking, if you spawn those right underneath him, you might never hit them to begin with, right? So just kind of have them spawning, and you can destroy the little roots and they can damage the player. And I think this is just awesome. Now you could do a pretty simple check when you damage the stump to see if the player was behind it or not. And you could do that just based on his facing. And then you would know if you should damage that mushroom to cut it off, or if you should just cause one of the spore things to spawn, right? I think that would be the next step with this enemy. This is really great. Now I do have one critique, even though I've given a pretty glowing review of it. I want him to be bigger. I feel like he should be bigger than the player. Uh-oh. That's not intended. Ignore that. I think he should be bigger than the player, because I think it would be fun if he was a little bit more of an obstacle to walk over. I can stand on him. I made him so that he's not, you know, he doesn't hurt the player by touching him. It would be hurt by the spores that spawn. I think that was kind of in line with the intention. But yeah, if he was big, that'd be great. Or maybe there's just a bigger version of him who's like a boss at the end of a level, something like that. But overall, great job. I wish I would have had time to implement the outline for this enemy fully. But hey, who knows? Maybe that'll be coming later down the road. So thank you, Alex, for this, what did we call it? The corrupted stump, the stump enemy. Amazing work. All right, so this next entry is Tweety the Cute Ghost, and this one is quite fun. I had to comment right off the bat. I love the animation of the, I don't know what you call this. They're not feet, you know, the bottom of the ghost. Tweety wasn't always a ghost. Once they were a tiny forest spirit that loved collecting lost things, buttons, shiny pebbles, forgotten toys. Travelers would sometimes hear soft giggles in the trees, followed by their missing trinket mysteriously returning, usually in a slightly improved form. But one harsh winter, the forest was abandoned. No travelers, no laughter, no lost things to collect. Tweety waited and waited until her form slowly faded, leaving behind only a faint, glowing echo. Now, Tweety drifts through the forgotten places, still searching for lost things, but their idea of lost has changed. They'll quietly follow adventurers, drawn to anything they carry. At first, it's harmless. A missing coin, a moved potion. Then weapons vanish. Paths loop, whispers echo. This is fun. Now I like that you gave this lore and description and all of this stuff. You may decide for Tweety to steal something every time it touches the player, hits or touches it. This is awesome. And you wanted to design something cute. I think you did a pretty good job with that. Now let's go ahead and take a look at this in a sprite. Okay, so here's the Tweety the Ghost sprite sheet. Looking really nice. We've got two versions of the idol, one that just has the looping bottom piece and the other one where it bobs up and down. I think this is great, and when you don't know the approach or the final way that this is going to be used, I think this is appropriate. Obviously, you know, you could determine with your developer if you're working on a team, like, are we going to do the bob animation in game, or do I need to bob the sprite? You know what I mean? Like, are we going to actually move the node up and down or something like that? Which I think is a very legitimate way to do it, in which case you might just need this version of the idol. Now there's a follow animation, which I like. The eyes get kind of angry looking, and then a shove. This is fun because it kind of backs up and then scoots forward. A little hurt animation, and then two versions of the death animation. I like the second one better. I think this first one, I get the idea, is kind of fun. It's like it's dissolving, but maybe just needs a little bit of refinement. That's kind of a tough effect to do though. So, you know, maybe get this to where it fades a little bit quicker, and then there's a few lingering particles that, you know, pixels left behind. But this death, I like this. This is very classic platformer style, but this one's just easy to use and implement and reads a little bit better. Overall, did a really good job, and this one is pretty game ready and whatnot. Now, the style, while it looks great, doesn't fit the Metroidvania 4 as well as some of the others, but let's see what it looks like in game. All right, I've got Tweety the Ghost over here. There we are. And you can see it's flying. Oop. And I have it kind of rush at the player. This was kind of a fun one because I did movement on both X and Y axes for these flying enemies, which made it kind of unique compared to the others. Let's see if I can kill it real quick. There we go. Cool. Now, Tweety the Ghost was submitted by Ashawe. Thank you for your submission. I love it. I love this one. All right, so Charon submitted this pixel art bandit. Now, there's a lot to love about this one. There's some improvements too, to be honest, with this one, certainly as far as how you've organized it. But let me show you guys what this bandit consists of. Charon's bandit here, you can see if you look at the layer stack on this, this is just like the axe run animation. And you can see he's got different versions. Like, okay, this guy's got, you can put a helmet on, you can give him an arrow, you can change the head style. There's like a black mohawk. There's like the blonde dude. There's the head itself. There's a heavy bow, or yeah, let's see, what is this? Bow heavy, bow mid, heavy armor, mid armor. Yeah, this is just super cool because you've got a whole bunch of variation built in. One of my critiques about this one is that this one is difficult to manage for a couple reasons. There's a little bit of a lack of consistency in how these are implemented and in the size of the frames. So like if I look at the attack, you can see the attack is actually done with animations. So you can see here we've got an attack animation, and this is cool. It's still got the same concept. You can change the hairstyle. I love the way you've animated the hair in these. Change the armor, can you change the weapon on this one? Maybe not. It's just an axe. Okay, so you can see some of these, you've got the animation just laid out in a row. Some, like the attack, are done as actual frames. Now this is what I would prefer, is that they're frames, but in addition to that, you've got your positions of your characters. See, these ones are frames too. Might be a little bit different here. The characters like on the ground. Oh, I've turned off, hold on, I was playing around with these. So let's go head one. I need to give him some armor maybe, and like skins off. That's weird. I had these exported. I don't know why that stuff's off. Okay, so this one's awesome, but notice the size of the sprite is different and the position of the character is different. So when bringing these into a game, this required a significant amount of work for me to get these things to line up. But the concept and what you're doing here is really excellent. Having all these different layers and variety and variation. I would just recommend that you find one that works the best. And I would say it's something kind of like this. One of these. This is ideal to me because it gives you the space you need. You might need to increase it a little bit, the size, so that you have space for your attack animations. And then continuing the let's see, this size with the concept of having your animations laid out. And then I would try and bring all the animations into one sprite file so that you could just export a single sprite sheet from that and be good to go. And what I did is I selected some styles that I liked. So I chose the red-headed guy, and I just created a new file. You can see I made it wider so that it could accommodate the attack. But then I just brought in idle animation, run animation. Love the hair movement again there. This is a great run animation, by the way. There's a block animation, attack, and death. Okay, and so I chose what I wanted. The red hair, I can't remember which version of the armor this is. Okay, but I just put one of the armors on him. Oh, I did it. I didn't get the sleeves on that one. Oops, I didn't notice that. Okay, so I mismatched a few things, but I chose the axe. Okay, and then I just created this. Now, if this had all those layers, if this file had these animations and all the layers, it would be super usable. And then you could just turn on the layers you want, hit export, and there's your sprite sheet for that variation. And I think that would be the ideal way to do it. So this is probably one of the first times, or maybe the first time, you've approached a complex character, enemy, I don't know, palette, I guess, if you will, like this, right? With all these different options. So I really do commend the effort. Just some feedback on how you might try and streamline that. Now let's look at this guy in game. He's amazing. He doesn't fit my art style very well. You know, he's different size than my character, but I think it's still worth looking at, and we can see kind of how he looks. So you can see I've got my little bandit right down here with the red hair running along, and I'm gonna go ahead and let him attack. I put the attack range pretty high on him, and then I have like a basic cooldown built in, but he's just gonna chase after the player. So you can see those animations work really well. He just is the wrong size, unless he's supposed to be like a brownie, or, you know, some kind of small gnomish race of creature or something like that. Boom, there we go. Loving the bandit. I'm gonna commend the effort put into all the variations on that. So good job, and thank you, Charon, for the submission of the bandit. Awesome work. Okay, we've got an entry here from Myla Doodles, and in full disclosure, this is my daughter. So Myla, thank you for taking time to submit this. And she submitted this worm, and I need to maybe do voiceover for these. You can hear a horrible squirming from deep within the dungeon. Upon further inspection, it seems the place is filled with maggots, giant maggots, or perhaps they're worms. You don't have much time to decide as these giant fiends are closing in and plan to make you their dinner. Okay, so here we go. Provided 4 animations. Now, this is something I think Myla probably didn't use a sprite, and so didn't have all the animations in one sprite sheet, but that's okay. It was still something easy to work with. I would say, though, as far as like being game ready, that's one thing that would be nice to improve. Obviously, if you've got one sprite sheet per enemy, that's typically ideal, and so that's something that we're shooting for. Now, in order to kind of demo these, let me just show these. The walk animation, I believe, was intended to be ping-ponging, which is how I set it up, which is cute. Very simple, 3 frames, but it's effective. And oftentimes with enemies, that's kind of ideal because you're spending less time animating enemies typically in a game, and you want to spend most of your focus on bosses and, of course, the player character, and maybe some other important set pieces. Now, this aggro animation is my favorite because of the little dripping slime from the mouth of this worm and like the wiggling tongue. Really cool. And I wasn't sure. Now the bite is basically the same, but not quite as cool because it doesn't have this. It doesn't have the slime. And I did implement a version of this bite, and I think it works relatively well. One piece of feedback I would give on this death animation is that it just kind of curls up and fades, and you don't really need to do a fade in the sprite like that, because you can just fade the sprite in the engine. So that you could have cut off a bunch of frames. You could have just had it shrivel up and ended on frame 21 right here. But otherwise, it's nice. And this is a very simple but effective color scheme. And what I do like about this one is the bright contrast between the mouth and the eyes, this red color, and then the rest of the worm that's white. Now, for my particular game, this one tended to work out pretty well because I've got a pretty dark scenes for my game. And so let me go ahead and show what this one looks like in game, and we'll talk about it a little bit more. I got to turn off the Doom Scribe. Maybe I might need to delete him, or he's going to try and cast spells on us even if he's invisible. Okay, so here we go. Let's run this. Hey, look, it's called Bandit. It's not supposed to be called Bandit, but I just did a quick and dirty implementation. Apparently I forgot to rename that one. Okay, so the worm over here, you can see that the worm stands out pretty well. And even though it doesn't have the same outline style that mine does, it tends to actually fit fairly naturally. So I was pretty impressed with that. Let's go ahead and kill this little worm. He's hard to hit when he's on the slope. There we go. Pretty cute, pretty fun. Again, I love the high contrast of it. It makes it stand out on most of my backgrounds. Makes it very readable, pretty simple, and like obvious to recognize. And again, got to compliment the slime in the mouth. That was probably my favorite part of this one. This item comes from Chonky Bites Studio, which I think is a great name. And there were 2 submissions with this one. There was a Golem and an Abomination. And as of the recording of this, or when I grabbed the assets, they weren't quite complete yet, which he kind of mentions here. So let's go ahead and take a look at these. So there's a chrysalid golem, once lived alongside humanity. They help build the great catacombs, dungeons, whole kingdoms even. However, once people realized the magics within them could be corrupted, they soon repurposed them as tools of war against their natured will. Forgotten to the tides of time, it is said some still lay in ruins, holding on to what magics they have left to carry out their last orders. Adventurers should take extreme caution if they're finding one. They're tough, made of magic's stone, and equipped with a magic's cannon and sword arm. They can be deadly at range and up close. While slow, they pack a serious punch. I'm not going to read the full Abomination lore, but let's go ahead and look at these in a sprite. Now, the Abomination only has this 1 frame, and I love it. It's not maybe quite finished, and obviously no animation, so I didn't implement this one. Chonky, hopefully you finish this soon and we can see the finished product. And then the Golem is maybe not 100% complete, but it's much more finished. You've got idle animations. I like this wake. So there's like the dormant frame, right, when it's just laying on the ground, which fits with the lore that you provided. And then it can wake up. I like how it stands up. And then there's a walk animation. We don't yet have maybe the attacks, and you can see, like mentioned, there's like a sword arm and a cannon arm. Now, my biggest feedback on both of these is that due to the nature and description of these, I expect them to be large. And this criticism only comes when compared to the hero in the Metroidvania Forge. These enemies are about the same size as the hero. And so they don't quite have that presence that you would expect from something like a Golem or Abomination, because I imagine these would be large, tough enemies. But, you know, if you've got a game where your character is only this tall, you know, down here, then yeah, it's probably appropriately sized. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at these in game. I say these, but I'm really only going to be showing the Golem. So I got to zoom past a couple enemies here. Hello, tree. Okay, here's the Golem. He wakes up and he walks. See, he's actually smaller than the player, which is not what we wanted from that, but that's okay. It's, you know, it's a work in progress. And again, I don't know what your game is. Look, he returned back to sleep. So maybe he's the right size for whatever game you're making. But really awesome. I love the progress, and I can't wait to see what the Golem and especially the Abomination, what they look like when you're finished. Okay, Dr. Dullsville submitted this, the Doom Scribe. This has got to be one of the more unique designs. I love this one. I wasn't sure if he was supposed to be flying or just hovering above the ground. I think the way I implemented him, he's basically a flying enemy. But I love this. A magical guardian animated from cursed ink. It wards off enemies within its range by scrawling cursed runes on its cursed scroll. Its quills aren't cursed, though, in case you were wondering. I love that. What's really unique about this one is he casts a spell. And so Dr. Dullsville here introduced this like rune being drawn, and it attacks the enemy. So this is pretty cool. I like that you've gone through and documented the frames required for the animations on each sprite sheet, along with the animation previews. Very nice job. Good job laying this out. Oh, look, the Scribe is a stationary enemy. Did I not read this? I think I didn't read this. He's a stationary enemy, best placed somewhere out of the player's reach. Once the player enters active range, it begins casting the animation, which starts drawing the cursed sigil over the player's head. If the player doesn't leave the Scribe's range or damage or defeat him in time, the complete sigil turns red and attacks the player for heavy damage or inflicts some other negative effect, such as paralyzing them in place. Ooh, that would be fun. We don't have we need to add a paralyzed state to our player. Would actually be kind of easy, aside from the fact that we don't have animations for it, but he's just like not moving, right? The Scribe would serve as a strategic obstacle, generally to be placed in either a hard-to-reach area or behind other tougher enemies to force the player to linger within its range. This forces the player to choose between backing out of its range or prioritizing defeating it quickly. Yeah, and even though I didn't read this and I made him moving, I did get the gist of it, that he's going to cast this spell and the player would have to... In my mind, I was thinking, okay, once this spell started, the player's got to defeat the enemy. I didn't fully implement that, though. That would be pretty easy to implement, I think, but I just implemented a basic version of it. Let's go ahead and check it out, though. Okay, so I've got a Doom Scribe here, and once I come within range, he's going to start drawing that attack, and there's nothing you can do to avoid it. Now, I think one thing I would do, and it's not necessarily with the animation itself, but I might try and make that that sigil that's being drawn kind of hover or bob, just so it's a little bit more dynamic. But you don't have to change the animation to do that, right? You can do that with code. I think I'm getting hit by an invisible worm. But dang it, Doom Scribe destroyed me. You can see I made him kind of flying. Because I guess sorry, Doc, I didn't read your description completely. But thank you for the submission. This one was awesome, very unique, very different, and I love it. Now, if I did have one feedback about the artwork on this one, it would just be that his contrast on his skin, it makes it so that you either see the scroll really well or the player really well. I feel like in an environment with mixed colors, you might need just a little bit of extra color on the Doom Scribe character himself. Maybe it gets a little bit brighter in the purples so that he reads a little bit better. But that's pretty minor, and if you put him in a level that's designed with him in mind, you know, you put him in the level and adjust the contrast of the background or of him to be appropriate, then those issues that I'm talking about might not be much of an issue. And in fact, let's just check him out one more time. Like, he looks good in front of those backgrounds, but in front of this stuff, he's kind of blends in a little bit more than I would like. I'm being kind of nitpicky. Just more contrast in the purple, I think, is what I'm getting after. Well, Dr. Dullsville, thank you for the Doom Scribe. All right, the bomb monsters. The person who submitted this goes by Pupubiu, which I don't know how that's supposed to be pronounced, but it makes me think of like a laser gun, like Pupubiu. So that's how I've been reading that in my head. Okay, so this sprite, I love this sprite. This one's kind of fun. Let me go ahead and pull it up in a sprite here. Okay, so with this submission, I really like actually the concept behind the layout of the sprite sheet, but it could be improved upon because there's a lot of unnecessary extra space out here, but we'll talk about that. But so you can see the different bomb sprites, and basically you've got a bomb that can explode. And if it were me, I would separate part of this explosion out and maybe create a separate explosion animation. But I like the concept of it. You've got like the bomb when he's just idling. Now there's one improvement I would suggest, and clearly see that you can't tell here, but we'll show you. The bomb kind of rocks in some of its animations, but when you rotate pixel art, you tend to get weird things like this little missing pixel right here. It would be good to come through and clean up after you do rotations, because rotations don't generally work very well. So you kind of want to clean that work up, make sure it looks good, and you know, that you get rid of any weird anomalies that are created by the rotation itself. So if you were to go through and do that to each of these, I mean, this could still be rounded out a little bit better. You know, I'm not sure. And I think keeping the pixel line consistent is also an important part of that process. Okay, it's going to help this look a lot better. So I would recommend going through and doing that. And then the only other thing I would suggest is maybe a little bit more contrast throughout. I do like the eyes, but they don't quite stand out to me. And so they need something more there, you know, just to help it read as eyes. Now, as far as the sprite sheet goes, I really love the idea of the label. So, you know, okay, these set of frames are the attack. These set of frames are the idle. I think what I would do, because I had never considered this, but I would reduce the size of these tags to be the size of one frame. And let me see if I can import this as a sprite sheet. And I think, if I remember, this might be like 64 by 64 size frames. Oh no, twice that, 128. Okay, so you can see, there we go. There's each of our frames. And then I guess you do actually have this doing exactly what I said. The difference is there's these empty frames out here. So I would have maybe the attack thing first and then all of the attack frames. And then you could have the idle frame and then all of the idle frames following it. And that would make it a little bit easier to use. And in fact, I think that would make it extremely easy to use, because even without frame numbers, you could just find those frames in the game, or in the editor when you're setting up the animations, and it would be good to go. But unfortunately, as it is, I would do, you know, a couple frames of idle, and then I would have to skip, you know, however many that is, 4 or 5, and then get the last 3 frames. And so, you know, it just made a little bit of guesswork when setting up the sprite in the game. So here's the bomb. Got some animations like the explosion. Ooh, even got some sound effects in there. Here we go. Okay, chase animation. So we've got like the little walk and waving his arms. I think I don't know if I set all these up. Actually, I didn't set up idle because I don't have a state machine or a decision engine quite set up for this guy. Oh, maybe I did put the idle on walk so I could do it, so I could demonstrate it. Yeah, there we go. Let's go ahead and pull this up in game real quick too. Okay, so here we go. We've got a little bomb over here who wakes up and tries to blow up when the player gets near. All right, so thank you, Pupubiu. Okay, this is one of 2 submitted by Robzon. This is the living armor. A suit of armor once worn in battle, the restless spirit of its previous owner still haunts its rattling remains. This is inspired by dark fantasy games like Dark Souls. And, oh yeah, he considers having it dash forward when it attacks or slashes. I didn't do that. I threw together just like a basic decision engine for these enemies. This is pretty cool. Now, I got to open this one up and look at some of the animations with you. Okay, let's just look at them here. This was a fairly game-ready sprite that was provided, so I commend you on that. It turned out really well. Now, one thing that you may be noticing, that the contrast isn't great on the gray background. I think that's actually a good indicator. Most of my backgrounds match a tone of this kind of a gray, if not darker. And so for this particular enemy, the only downside for me and for my game was that he was sometimes a little bit too dark. That might just be because I'm putting him in the wrong environment. But let's go ahead and look at this guy. He's got some beautiful animations. Just look at in fact, let me turn off these grid lines. Can I turn those off? Ruler's Guides Origin. Look at that beautiful bobbing head and the waving loincloth bit on the armor. Stun, is there... I don't know if there's supposed to be a stun animation. I just took part of the death animation, I think, which is amazing. Very well done. The walk is also really well done. Pretty cool. I like how he's just got that arm in the back, no arm in front. And the bubbling head is just great. Let's see, walk, and then there's attack. a nice wind up. A wind up is sometimes really important, especially on enemies that hit heavy. Okay, let's go ahead and look at this guy in the game. Now you can see I dropped him into an area with a lighter background. This isn't perfect, but I just did it so that he stood out because he was blending in. Saw a little preview of one of Robzon's other submissions down below, but here's the enemy. He saw me, so he's walking. Oh shoot. I didn't implement like an attack area, but you can see how he works when he gets within range. So this was awesome. Now the art style of this doesn't fit my game, you know, exactly, but the sizing and things like that are all really well done. And I just got to compliment the beautiful smooth animations. There was a lot of keyframes in those, and that sometimes is a lot of work. One way that I think Robzon made that kind of work for him and efficient is that there's a very simple use of color. So his areas basically have like just a regular color and a shadow color, which does make it easier to do animations, right? Because you don't have to worry about all these highlights and stuff like that. So beautiful job. Thank you, Robzon, for the submission. Okay, so we've got another entry from Robzon, and this was actually, I believe, the second entry that was submitted. It was submitted quite early on. It's the Ghost/Shade enemy. And so this is our second ghost, but this is a totally different style. The lore here is that this is the spirit of a victim long since forgotten. Their vengeful soul remains tethered to the physical realm, roaming aimlessly and striking at any living creature they come across. He says it's inspired by various ghost-like enemies. He wanted to have short and simple animations, but make the hair long and flowing. I'm going to say, Robzon, this screenshot actually doesn't do the sprite justice. An animated GIF would be amazing here. You guys are going to see what I'm talking about. The choice to make the enemy entirely dark/black, except for the hair, was mostly to avoid drawing a sprite that was overly detailed, but he thinks that it will be a bit more creepy as well. Okay, so here is this ghost enemy, the Shade, and you can see it's based on that screenshot. This is not at all what I expected, but I love this. I love the eye animation where the hair kind of flows. It's not 100% realistic, but it feels so good. I'm not saying it should be more realistic, by the way. I'm just saying it's just so cool how you did this. It kind of bobs in an otherworldly fashion, I think. So we've got this very dark enemy. Here's the walk or float animation with awesome detail in the hair. I love how you've basically done very little animation to the body and really kind of illustrated or suggested the animation through the movement of the hair. And in some ways, I think that's actually a really advanced kind of an animation technique because you can communicate so much with that. The momentum, the velocity, all of that just being illustrated through the hair. Here's the attack. Now this is where we get that screenshot on the page, and it makes it look like a different kind of creature than it is. It does, because it's almost, to me, it's just like a little ghost girl or something, you know? But this is a great attack animation. And again, what's cool about this, I'm gonna just kind of nerd out about this one a little bit. We go from like arm back, recoiling before the attack, and then a full swipe, right? We don't animate the frames in between. And this is really actually smart because all of the momentum and power of this animation happens through these smears as well as the hair, right? The hair shows like, oh, that was really fast because it caused the hair to go up and then it swings back down, you know? So this is just really well done and really awesome. Let's look at the death animation real quick. Kind of fun, just like turns into a puff of charcoal black smoke. And let's go ahead and look at this one in game. I honestly, I think this scene's a little bit ugly, but you can see down here, I've got the little Shade enemy. So here it is. Again, size-wise, this one's quite small, but the enemy design itself is pretty fantastic. So I hope it fits well with whatever game you're designing because it's just amazing. Love the fluid animations on that and really appreciate the submissions. All right, so this entry was submitted by Lucky Loops, and this was not part of the competition, but I've really got to compliment you on your itch.io page because it's absolutely gorgeous. And I followed you because I want to see what you're going to be doing next. And so Lucky Loops submitted this. It's called Nature's Living Dead. It's this zombie guy. And I really love that on this page, you put pretty much all the animations or maybe all of them. And this cute little plug that it's free. This is brilliant too. Rate the asset, prompting people to rate it. That's not something I normally do. And it feels kind of selfish or weird to do that sometimes, but it's really necessary because sometimes people want to or would be happy to. They just forget that that's a thing. And I think this is a nice gentle or natural way to just request that people rate you. Also, you've given all the frames here, and this is one of the assets that was quite game ready. It was really nice. I think there's some things that maybe could be improved as far as game readiness goes, but I would rank it pretty high in that kind of a category. Now, the design idea for this is pretty fun, and let me go ahead and read the lore. Nature's living dead is a hero who years after his death was possessed by the power of corrupted nature and raised as a revenant to guard the forest and its dungeons. So it's kind of fun. It's a skull floating in mud covered with moss and secreting acid with which it defends the territories entrusted to it. So kind of cool. To me, they're kind of boogery, this acid, but I really love it. Now, what's fun is I kind of went through and tried to implement at least a basic version of these enemies. I didn't build the projectile, but there is a projectile included in the sprite sheet, which is pretty awesome. Both of these attacks are pretty cool and unique. So this is cool because you've thought through like what happens when the player gets close. Can they attack from far away? And there's both options, right? Sometimes you have a ranged enemy, oftentimes, and they only have the ranged attack. And then when you're close, they're still doing the ranged attack. In this case, he'd have like a melee attack. So pretty cool. I like that we've got a dodge. Great, wonderful death animation. I like the alert. I've done that in other games. One thing that you might consider if you're building your own game, and this is not a critique here necessarily, but it could be, is that, you know, if you're building your own game, you probably want this little alert icon emote kind of a thing, at least this, you know, this top portion of it, to be something separate that you reuse amongst enemies. So it might not be baked into the sprite sheet if you're building a full set. The face. That's awesome. I think that this submission was awesome. The animations are top notch. I think that the color palette and everything is quite appropriate. One area where I kind of felt like there could be a minor improvement was the use of outlines and contrast, because I feel like it's different between the bulbous sacs on the back and the rest of the character. And so I'm not quite sure, you know, if you need a little bit more intense outline, higher contrast outline on the rest of the body to help complement that, because really with these sacs you go from a really bright highlight green to a basically black, or maybe that is black. And so I feel like there's a slight mismatch. It's nothing major. This is just, you know, if I were to try and improve it, I might work on that first and see if I could get just a little bit more contrast, maybe more shadow underneath the face, right, you know, where he's coming in contact with the body. But otherwise, this is an awesome entry, and again, kudos on the amazing itch.io page. This is totally gorgeous. Now, this next bit of feedback is maybe kind of to be expected. One thing that I don't know if this is a kind of a common thing, but the size of this enemy, oops, he's right behind that tree. The size of this enemy is quite small, right? And so he doesn't quite fit very well with this particular game. But obviously, if you were doing a different game with a lower resolution and your enemy, or your hero were smaller, then that wouldn't matter so much. But for that reason alone, I would say it either needs to be reworked to be larger, because I think that this enemy should be similar in size to the player, or it should be maybe reserved for a different game. But anyways, thank you, Lucky Loops. I love it. All right, now Pzavier submitted two, and one he said used AI, and so I'm not really going to review that one. That's this goblin, and as he mentions, it's kind of incomplete, but he also submitted this fly eye, and you can see this guy here. Now, I like this design of this. I love the wings. This has a similar sprite rotation issue to I guess it was the bomb who had some sprite rotation. It looks like as the sprite was rotated, you get some weird little artifacts and things like that, and so this might be better if it were smoothed out and remove some of the little bits and bobs sticking out, okay? So that kind of keeps it looking nice and clean. These things happen a lot when you rotate sprite artwork. And it looks like you may have done this in a different software and then brought it in to something like Asprite. And so that contributed to maybe like some little colors getting transitioned or blended together. Maybe this was larger when you started and you had to scale it down. I love the explosion animation on this guy. One thing that's nice about this is he's clean and very easy to read. Like, this guy would be super recognizable. He has an obvious silhouette. And I like the wing flapping. Let's go ahead and check this one out in game. Okay, so here's the fly eye. Where's he at? There he is. So you can see I've got him kind of swooping at the player and stuff like that. Oops, I don't have my abilities yet. Let me turn those on. Pretty simple. And then let's go ahead and just kill him. Nice, a little bit of an explosion. Now that explosion animation is a little bit long. Maybe I could have played that back the frames a little bit differently to fix that. But overall, I think that's a great submission. Thank you, Pzavier, for the fly eye. This entry from Witty username is the Dungeon Rat, and I love this one. A simple dungeon rat, perfect for stalking your dungeons with. Includes a variant with a fancy little hat. He lists the animations here, and let's go ahead and take a peek at this one. Now, I just brought in the version with the hat. Let's see where we at here. Let's go ahead and bring up my preview window so we can just have those animations playing as we go through. This one is great. Now, like some of the others, this is a very small enemy, but it seems appropriately small because it's a rat. And, rats don't have to be enormous, or RUSs. Here's the running animation, little prancing. I love the little tail wag. He's got I think this was supposed to be the attack. Did I get that right? Like a pouncing animation, a little stun animation, and then the death animation. Now, there were some blank frames that I think were plopped in here when I imported this into a sprite like this. This file was provided as a pretty game-ready piece of artwork, so kudos on that. It turned out really well. I love the tail wagging. I think that's one of the highlights of this one. I feel like there's a mismatch in contrast on the outlines of the body and the legs. I'm not sure if that was intentional, but one thing that I like to do is have it darker if there's either shadow or it's closer to the ground. So I feel like the outlines on the legs could be getting darker down here, and then this lighter gray could be on the top of the back. And on top of that, with the version with the hat here, I would love if the hat kind of bobbed up off the head of the rat a little bit as he ran and jumped. I think that'd be really fun, just like a fun piece of flair that you could add. Now, let's go ahead and check this guy out in the game. I added this one to my playground scene, and he's over here to the right. There you go. You can see the little rat. I'm not sure why he's not running. Oh, there he goes. Jumped at me. So I just got like a little lunge attack animation, and he's pretty wimpy, so sorry, rat, you're dead. One thing I noticed is I feel like the death animation of the rat mirrors the death animation that I designed for the hero in this game. I like that. I think that's cool. If it's going to be consistent, that's fun. I like that touch. Thank you, Witty username, or is it Witty username 34? I'm not sure, but I appreciate the rat, and thank you for the entry. Okay, this next item is from EarthPainting, and this is the Vertecray. Now, I wish I could have implemented everything I need for this Vertecray. Unfortunately, I don't yet have a ladder climbing mechanic in the Metroidvania Forge. Man, that's actually a feature I built in a previous Metroid title. So Tundra, the original, like my very first Metroidvania that I made, which was actually built in Unity, I did have a ladder climbing mechanic, and I ported that over to Godot, but I mean, it was like one of my early projects, and so I'm not really happy with the code base. So after seeing this, though, at some point after I wrap up the Metroidvania Forge, I'm going to bring the ladder mechanic in, just if for no other reason than for this enemy. So let me just read this. If you walk underneath the Vertecray, he'll slam down to the ground, and he'll have an exposed spine that you can use as a ladder while he's stuck in the ground. And then after a while, he'll go back up, removing the ladder. Now, this is the file that was provided by EarthPainting, and I love this little mock-up. Kudos on putting him in an environment and checking him against the player to make sure that he fits. And you can see that the design is that he's kind of hidden slightly in the ceiling, and then he'll slam down into the ground, and then you could climb up the spine. Now, obviously, in this particular scenario, there's not a lot to climb up to, and it's a shorter distance, but you could see if it were higher, maybe he could help you reach unreachable terrain or something like that. I've got to say, I absolutely love this. One thing I love about this is the simplicity of it. Very few frames required, a lot of thought put into it. You can see that this spine layer is something that can tile and repeat. We've got just the little eye section open and close, so you could even maybe introduce blinking with that if you wanted to. The only critique I have about this is that it's not very game ready, because you've got the colored backgrounds behind him. They do help visually separate it. It's really good for this representation purpose, but I would have liked a file like this as well that's game ready. You just drop in. You don't have to do any extra work to get what you need out of it. But other than that, I mean, you did a really great job, and I love the use of colors. I feel like the style of this fits extremely well with what I did, with the exception of maybe harsher outlines on yours than I have on mine. But you might be designing this for your own game too, and so you don't have to take that feedback. Just if I were trying to merge it together, I might do a little bit of adjustment on the outlines, like maybe some lighter highlighted color outlines over here, Let me just go ahead and demonstrate what I'm talking about. You know, maybe not all the outlines are dark on this. Kind of like my player. I'm using the, I don't know what you call it, but just a different, more subtle kind of outlining. Okay. But this is just all, you know, general feedback. Take it or leave it. You don't have to do anything with it. Okay. So just some little differences on there might make him fit the style of the hero a little bit more, right? Where we've got some areas don't have the fully dark outline. Now, the ladder climbing concept, I gotta say the design and the overall approach to this is probably one of the most unique. So yeah, love the ladder tie-in. I think the art is super well done, extremely well executed. I think it's game ready, and especially for whatever game you're making, this is probably perfect. Like, I don't know that you need to do anything. This is just awesome. And again, the simplicity of it makes it great. Okay, so in game, let's go ahead and take a look at this. You can see here he is. He's up in the ceiling here. I didn't do an exterior. I just didn't want to have to create too many new levels because I've already been delayed trying to get this video out. But here we go. I'll walk underneath him, slams down, and then you could try and climb up him, obviously, but oops, now I got him to repeat. That little bug. This is obviously kind of just a fake hammered in version of the enemy. This is not a real implementation of him, but man, this is definitely one that I want to integrate. Like I said, I'm just missing that ladder mechanic in my game to make full use of this character or enemy design. But wonderful job, EarthPainting. Thank you for the submission. All right, I'm going to make a few call outs of my favorite submissions for different reasons. There's some that have done different things very well. And so I just want to make a special mention of these real quick. My favorite design idea, I'm going to give this award to the Vertecray enemy, which was submitted by EarthPainting. And I mean, the enemy is fairly straightforward, extremely simple, but with the cool twist of being able to use the spine of the creature as a ladder. And it's inspired me to probably add that as an ability to this series, but maybe later on once I finish a few things. So congratulations, Vertecray. I think that's such a unique idea. Next, I'm going to feature the Scribe, which was submitted by Dr. Dullsville. To me, this is an example of an extremely well put together set. I think it's the most game ready of all of them. There is pretty tight competition in this arena, though, of which items were most game ready. But the Scribe had sprite sheets that were exported and game ready, but it also had really well documented animations. They had split out the animation for his magic spell, which others did similar things as well. But I think Scribe just edged out the competition as far as being the most game ready. I looked at the pixel craft of all of these, and I was trying to consider which of these items do I think best represents pixel craft. And this was hard because different entries impressed me in different ways. But for me, the standout is going to be the Shade enemy submitted by Robzon. I just absolutely love what you've done with the hair and the way the animations work. I think this is an excellent example for anybody watching on the impact that something like the hair or cloth or those simple items can have on the animation, and just how unimportant some of the other stuff we think about is, right? So because you've done such a good job with those animations, I'm awarding you Best Pixel Craft out of all the entries. The last award I'm going to give is the best fit for the Metroidvania Forge. And this goes to none other than the Corrupted Stump, submitted by Oner. This obviously just fits seamlessly into the game world, and it was a top contender as well for pixel craft. And I really love the attention to detail, the use of colors, and you know, the fact that you use this and made it fit seamlessly with the grass and the forest tile set just shows how much thought and attention you put into that. And yeah, it's a natural fit. I'm gonna have to figure out how to make this work as intended, because it also had a really top-notch enemy design as well, with the concepts around healing and hurting the player and the things that it can do. So I look forward to working with this and all the others that I've mentioned, and appreciate everybody's work in submitting these awesome items. So now that we're at this point, the next step is for me to continue on with the enemies chapter for the Metroidvania Forge. So we're going to be implementing and building different enemies, and you're going to see a few of these pop up. For those of you who are watching, I have an itch.io collection, which is linked in the description and in the comments. In this collection, you can find all of the submission entry pages, so you can go grab these sprite sheets if you want to look at them, if you want to use them. And thank you guys for making these available to everybody. It really fits in the spirit of what I'm trying to do with this channel, which is just to share, to help other people learn and grow and improve in their own game making craft. So thanks everybody for watching, and thank you for those who submitted again. And as always, we'll see you next time.